Beverly, in times of crisis, we see governments struggling to hold on to the narrative. And Twitter's disclosure on Saturday that the Modi government had ordered it to take down more than 50 tweets is a great example of this. Twitter hasn't specified what the content of the tweets that were requested to be taken down, what was in those tweets, but we have media allegations that one of the tweets that was taken down was from a politician in West Bengal who criticized the Modi government for the pandemic response. There are currently elections happening in West Bengal. It's a growing trend in Indian politics, unfortunately. We saw that during the farmer protests, where the Modi government ordered Twitter to take down tweets that were considered to provoke unrest. And in fact, the Indian government pointed to Twitter's actions during the US Capitol siege as justification to censor farmers protesting, because in a similar way, they alleged that it promoted unrest in India.
Does it not further damage the government's credibility, though?
I think it definitely does. And India is a vibrant democracy, and the outrage that we're seeing from human rights commentators, from journalists, are a good example of this damage that you talk about. It's certainly not a good look for the government during a humanitarian crisis to be focused on the narrative as opposed to what measures they're undertaking to combat the deaths occurring every day in India.
National Security Cabinet here tomorrow will consider how they can assist. Now, how critical to this relationship do you think support from Australia is at this point in time?
It's absolutely critical, and I really welcome the reporting at the moment that Australia is considering sending over ventilators, and I hope in tomorrow's announcement that's extended to rapid testing kits and PPE. The relationship with India is imperative for Australia, especially in the context of rising tensions with China. And we saw earlier this year the Quad leaders meeting between the leaders of Australia, India, Japan, and the United States. The way that Australia responds to the crisis unfolding in India will be a good example of how the Quad as a forum can be useful on the world stage beyond defence and strategic issues. So it's critical to our foreign policy that we extend a helping hand and be an active player in the Indo-Pacific region with a key partner, which is India.
Yes, of course. So extending a hand in one direction, but potentially putting up the stop sign in another. So what impact do you think any cessation or restriction of flights might have with Indian Australians wanting to return to Australia?
Well, extending a hand, as you acknowledge, is all well and good, but the Australian government's first priority is to its own citizens. And the worst possible thing the government could do in a situation like this is abandon its own citizens overseas. What I'd like to see tomorrow is an increase of the repatriation flights and opportunities to increase the quarantine capacity so that Australian citizens can be returned home. It would be a disaster if the takeaway lesson from the past year is that we leave Australian citizens stranded in their time of need.
Yet the WA Premier pointed out that people should not be travelling to India for events like weddings and then coming back and potentially then putting at risk the hard work that Australia has done to contain COVID. Is that a fair comment by Mark McGovern?
I think those comments were quite unhelpful. Mark McGowan is understandably touched on something that many Australians would be thinking about, but I think it frames the question in an unfair way and scapegoats an Australian citizen for the failures of government quarantine. The man in question, when he left in December, did so legally and well within the selection criteria of federal governments to leave the country. So it's important that the narrative around this doesn't undermine our foreign policy imperative to grow the relationship with India and our bilateral relationships, and doesn't offside the Australian Indian community, because that would be at cross purposes to our foreign policy.
Interesting. Sonia, good to have you on. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Beverly.